I think we're going to see, as we saw, as you mentioned with brands, sort of that collapsing of the extremes of the value propositions.
Exactly.
I think we'll see the same things with retail media networks. I know we just said that first-party data is very special. I'm going to now say the opposite. First-party data is not that special.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Ecommert Podcast. Today we're here in downtown Manhattan at the magnificent Yale Club, and we're hosting Jack Lindberg from Shalion, who is leading the product and product strategy. Jack, thanks for having us at this Yale Club today.
Oh, my pleasure, Mert. Thanks so much for having me on.
I think we're going to have a lot of good insights with the library scene behind us and with all the ivory power of Yale. Let's kick it.
We'll try to be scholarly, yeah.
I think we're going to touch upon about the digital commerce, digital sales synergy. I'm sure you're going to bring in some data and AI into the mix. And I'm always going to bring more retail media and retailer to the conversation. I think it's going to be a good one.
Sounds great. And I'm sure you'll hit me with a Mert classic curveball. Let's do it.
We have a couple of them, I guarantee you. But hopefully a soft curveball. Let's start with the journey, because every time I find someone with data background, I'm even more curious about your career journey. I'm even more curious about how you end up in CPG and tech. Please walk us through your career journey, some milestones, and what you guys building at Shalion as a team.
Sure. Yeah. So Jack Lindberg, I lead product strategy at Shalion. My career journey is not one that I would suggest anyone try to replicate.
Okay. Disclaimer.
I did my undergraduate at Yale in music, and I have my master's from the Guildhall School of Music and Drama and Opera Performance.
Wow.
So
that's some detour.
Yeah, big detour. So I went to school thinking I would be a professional opera singer. I still perform some, not a lot. I consider myself semi-retired,
okay.
But I finished my master's degree when I was living in London, right when COVID hit, and went through that whole process of moving back from London to my parents' house in New Jersey. And after about 2-3 months with my parents, going from living abroad to living at home was a shift that needed to end immediately.
Of course.
And I called everyone in my network, and my godmother, who's a career coach, was like, hey, I think you should think about e-commerce. They don't care that you don't know anything and you don't have any skills. You'll figure it out.
Some smart godmother you have there.
She's great. And so I started my career agency side, literally doing hands-on keys bid management for Amazon. I moved over to PackView, where
we did all that at some part of our career.
Oh yeah, you got to start in the trenches. I moved over to PackView because I was super interested in what I found at the agency side was we solved a lot of things for one client one time. And I was like, well, the way to solve that for every client all the time is to move to the tech side, right? And I'm not a technical person by training and picked a whole bit up on the job. Moved to PackView, spent 2 years there, first on customer success and then on the product side. Mm-hmm. Went back agency side for a bit, where I spent a lot of work on data clean rooms for retailers.
Cool.
I spent a lot of time talking about Amazon Marketing Cloud, which
not many people were aware in the early days.
Yeah, 2-3 years ago, I was a little ahead of the curve, maybe too far ahead.
Yeah.
And I learned how to write SQL. To do that, I was handed it as a project by one of the PackView founders and was like, go learn Amazon Marketing Cloud. And I was like, I don't know how to write SQL. So I had to go figure that out. I had to go figure that out. And then a little more than a year ago, I started at Shalion, always leading products, working on how do we connect the dots between digital shelf and retail media. What we've seen, my background not being in digital shelf, really on the retail media side, was there's a lot of lip service to that digital shelf retail media connection, and not a lot of actually making it happen.
We live in the promise.
Yeah, a lot of trading on the promise, not on the execution, and trying to make that more of a reality for brands and their agency partners.
That's a lot of revelations for me. I didn't know you had music background and even an opera singer career. We should tap on that on another episode, maybe with some performance. Let's do it. Let's see what we can do.
Me and Chris Perry. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, because he's also developing on that track lately. But yes, this is super cool. But now music is one important aspect of human life, of course, but food is another. And I noticed from the publications and from some of the case studies you guys revealed lately, I know you're paying a lot of attention to the food service, QSRs, and menus in particular. So I want to bring the point right diving into the menus and the food aggregators, last mile delivery. Because to your point, digital shelf retail media is a good synergy, but most of the time it's really not about execution, it's more about the potential. Mm-hmm. But I think you guys are working on some really tactical execution on that front. Can you walk us through what's making food service, aggregators, last mile delivery so unique, and why menus are important for retail media?
Yeah, totally. So when you think about the landscape of retail media networks or places where brands can have large customers, there becomes sort of a saturation point where as a brand, I know I sell to a large number of customers, but from a logistical and operational standpoint, I can't support the 150th biggest retail media network. That becomes impossible, right?
Right.
And now that we are 200 plus retail media networks, I wouldn't want to be the smallest one. That being said, those delivery apps, quick commerce platforms, the GoPuffs, Instacarts, Uber Eats, DoorDashes of the world pose a unique value proposition to those brands because they engage with consumers in two unique ways. One is they target a new purchase or buying behavior, which is this impulse buy. I'm sitting at home, it's 11 o'clock at night, and I really want a chocolate bar. In most places, everything's closed.
Of course, yeah.
And having it magically appear at your doorstep is a buying occasion.
Warehouse.
Right.
Yeah.
And having it magically appear at your doorstep is something that those delivery apps uniquely enable, with maybe some retailers following suit. The second is they unlock a whole different range of distribution for a separate set of on-premises consumption sort of locations, which are those restaurants, right? So when we think about digital shelves, we're really used to that grid search placements for a traditional brick and mortar or omni-channel e-com retailer. But when we think about restaurants, digital menus pose a whole variety of unique challenges for brands in spaces in grocery or like drinks, for example, or even things like something you would deliver from a pharmacy or
right. Walgreens and
something like
CVS
that.
Of the world, yeah.
Yeah, the digital menu poses a unique challenge because they're extremely non-standard.
No way.
All retailers follow general best practices about, hey, a grid is a grid and this is how it works and here's how price appears. All of these menus operate sort of like the wild, wild west, extremely non-standard. But for brands, we spend so much time thinking about how do I ensure that I'm providing a cohesive customer journey and my branding moments and giving my value prop as the customer goes through their buying process in this quick commerce arena where you have a very short amount of time to build that customer trust. We see brands all the time drop the ball right at the last minute.
Because it's complicated and difficult.
Right. So a really good example is like there's a very large restaurant chain that sells sandwiches called Jersey Mike's.
My favorite.
Yeah,
I have
very good. Very good.
Number 7.
So they're a Pepsi exclusive retailer or restaurant chain. When we go onto their menu on DoorDash, they have a picture of a Mountain Dew. You click on it to try to order a Mountain Dew, and it says they only have regular Pepsi.
Okay.
Which, like, as Pepsi as a brand, one, they probably also have Mountain Dew if they have a photo of it.
Right.
And you're missing all these opportunities to get customers to buy your product right at the last minute of impulse consumption. That if for a brand like Pepsi or Coca-Cola or any of these food manufacturers that sell to restaurants, on-prem consumption is a big part of your sales puzzle. And losing that right at the final moment is kind of a shame.
How are you guys thinking about bringing or extending the menus available on the apps like Uber Eats, DoorDash, Grubhub, Just Eats as an extension of digital shelf? Because to your point, it's complicated, it's messy, but at the end of the day, it's a huge part of the consumer experience, which means a big part of the digital shelf. How are you closing the gap, or is it still a long way to go? What is your current track on the digital shelf extension of menu?
Great question. So I think we're starting that process of helping brands have the data to refocus their efforts.
Right.
So for field sales teams, one of the big pressures is increasing distribution. How do I know what restaurants either I or my distributors sell to?
Right.
Which gets very complicated. How do I know if their physical presence of the product in the store matches the online presence of the product in the digital menu? And how do I identify where my competitors are gaining share and where I should be pushing as well? Is my content correct? Is this retailer violating the pricing agreement I have with them?
Oh, yeah.
It gets very complicated very fast. So what we've developed at Shalion, based off of the core competence we have doing like retail level crawling, like pin drop locations, we do the same sort of process, but crawl menus for restaurants.
Mm-hmm.
So you go into DoorDash, you drop a pin, you crawl a menu of every restaurant in that location, and you aggregate to say, in the drink section, which is non-standard in all of these menus, which drinks are there? Or is your brand there? What do the images look like? Did someone just take a snapshot on their iPhone of this can? And it's not very clear.
No.
Your branding sort of dies at that hill, right? And then aggregate all of that up to help brands sync this with their CRM to say, hey, if I'm a field sales rep, but I'm the regional director for the Western region, and I need to go drive increased distribution in Seattle, where do I start? Who do I need to call at that restaurant or at that delivery app partner to say, the content on this very large retailer is wrong, or has my product in the image, but doesn't have my product in the brand, in the title, my brand name in the title.
It could be even a full menu on the table with a plate and a drink on a cup. It doesn't have to be product packaging. Most of the time,
it could be anything.
Yes.
It could totally Wild West.
Now, I want to invert the question then. From your conversations and from ongoing engagements with your clients and the CPG brands, of course, the usual suspects will be food and beverage and snacking, desserts.
Yep.
But what brands or what categories do you see doing a better job in terms of approaching menus from a digital shelf angle more successfully and cracking the code with the measurement or with more resources? Is there any differentiation between some successful ones and the laggards?
Good question. So I think the laggards are definitely things like alcohol.
Okay.
And soft drinks. A big part is because those functionally use a distribution model. The way they get onto the physical on-prem location is very different than a brand that sells directly to the retailer or has like a field sales or a restaurant team. So we've seen some data from OpenTable, for example, that 86% of customers check out the digital menu before they go in store.
My wife does it 100% of the time.
Right. So if you were Pernod Ricard and you wanted someone to go to a bar that served your drinks, they're going to check the menu before they go.
Yeah.
And if you're not on there, even if you are really sold there, that person might not choose the outlet that sells your products. And once you have the distributor model, the data flow from the restaurant to the app to the distributor to the brand, that chain gets broken rather quickly.
Very quickly. And now this begs another question from my daily practice with other CPGs we work with. Now they're trying to bring more traffic to those pages with the retail media. Mm-hmm. And now retail media, of course, is the biggest catalyst for the growth. But then what metrics from this digital shelf extension or digital shelf sub-channel we just described on the menu and QSR world, what metrics do you think and do you promote supporting the retail media decision? Because driving traffic is one thing, then converting the traffic on the page is another. Where's the synergy and what metrics do you promote to support these retail media conversation?
Yeah, super good question. The first one I would start with is just pinpoint level distribution.
Right.
Most retail media networks are getting wise to the fact that you need to be able to geo-target.
Of course.
Some of them you still can't.
If you can.
Which is a big pain. But in the ones where you can, you want to then direct your funds to the places where you have distribution so that you're spending money on eyes that can actually go buy that product. We see this happen in reverse all the time, where people buy national ads and pay tons of impressions in places where no one can go purchase your product, which hurts me a little. The second one I would think about is content. What does the content look like for your product? Are you correctly branded on that restaurant's menu? Like with your brand forward, like actually brand derived assets rather than some random restaurant assets.
Brand has much less control of their content on the menu.
Right. We've seen a bunch of interesting studies from Salsify about how much more people are willing to pay for a branded product if it's from a brand they trust.
Right.
So the generic
delta,
it's like 25% or 30%.
Oh, pretty good.
So if you have a restaurant that says bottle of water, having them replace it with Essentia bottled water increases the amount you can charge for that bottled water by a ton.
Of course.
So you really want to work with that restaurant partner to say, how do I make sure that you're branding me in those right moments? Because you both benefit.
Now, okay, I want to bring it down to I'm thinking if I were also investing in a menu of my aggregator platform or last mile delivery platform, the question would be, yeah, we can see the lift, we can see the delta, but is this delta going to occur with the organic traffic or what the incrementality of this? Now I know you're a big advocate of the definition of incrementality because before it became a buzzword, everybody threw a lot of formulations out there. Then industry got a little bit educated. Everybody started questioning the formulation behind the incrementality. I want to hear your description. I heard it in Atlanta, but for the audience and people who's listening to us for the first time, I like your definition in the first one.
So I think
give us a definition of incrementality and how it can be measured in the menu ecosystem.
Ooh, okay. So incrementality is at its core cause and effect.
Right.
What action did I take or not take or change in the environment caused some output? Typically when we talk about incrementality in e-commerce, we're usually having the output be sales and the input could be anything.
Right.
Increased distribution, better content, more retail media, what have you, better targeting. The core underlying argument about causality is correlation does not equal causality.
No way. No.
I don't know if you like West Wing.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so there's a really good episode in West Wing, which I sometimes talk about when talking about incrementality, which is called post hoc ergo propter hoc.
Okay.
Which, if you're rusty on Latin, it basically means just because something happened before something else doesn't mean that the thing that happened before caused the following.
Right. And the famous example for this is the Nobel Prize winners and the chocolate consumption rate. Do you know about the anecdote?
No.
They made an analysis of countries consuming chocolate per capita and the Nobel Prize winners. And there's a correlation with Switzerland, of course, and all chocolate consumption high countries, but there's no causation to your point.
Right. So there are a bunch of ways to do causal analysis. They sort of divide into two camps. One is like an observational, like a post observational study where you look at the world as it happens naturally and you use some robust statistical methods to pull out what caused what. The other one is you run a test, like an A/B test or a matched market test or what have you. Both are tricky. They have their own methodological concerns, which you don't have to dive into to the bottom. What I would say is, for these QSRs or FSAs or delivery apps, whatever the word is, I think we haven't really aligned on one as an industry.
Right.
The approach I would suggest is thinking much more about the geo-target match market test because you have that level of control with knowledge about where you're actually distributed. And if you, for example, buy, I don't know, a top of funnel DSP ads in market A and not in market B, you can see the sell-through or at least the reorder rates through that distributor for those locations. When we've spoke to brands at some events recently, one of the things we heard was a big blind spot was, I don't get POS from a restaurant. I just get orders. Like I get sell in, but not sell out, which makes it tricky, right? Because it's lagged. The reorder is not the event you want to cause. You want to cause the sale at the point.
Yeah, that's the ultimate goal.
Right, which is very tricky to measure. So that's a place where we're thinking about how to push with brands and move in that direction. But what we've heard from brands is getting restaurant POS data is very challenging, at least in a stable way.
You caught me on my thought track. I was going in the same direction because I'm thinking in the back of my head. Yeah, we can scrape the data. We can measure the digital shelf level data. And I think that's one of the things Shalion does good level. But then you also need the data from the platform.
Oh, yeah.
And how many of these platforms are allowing API integration or how much of our data we can get our hands into? So there are three components: digital shelf level data, data from brand, And also data from platform. So where are you in this triangle?
Our data set, I think, is a good piece of the puzzle. I think the brand data typically is the piece that's more important, which is the how do I know when I've shipped an order to my distributor or directly to the restaurant if you distribute yourself?
Right.
The sort of sell-in volume. Because that's the number you're trying to grow is how do I get people to buy more of my products or of a greater variety.
And preferably new people who didn't buy before.
Or new people that didn't buy before, right? That being said, the third leg of this three-legged stool that the delivery apps have really understood quite well, I think, at least the larger ones, that they have a very unique data asset of cross-retailer purchasing that very few other companies can rival.
Right.
Only on DoorDash do I order from my local restaurant and CVS and my grocery store all in one shot. So those platforms have been starting to, and Instacart is ahead of the curve on this for more than the other ones, about monetizing that data set, selling it back to brands and saying, hey, do you want basically the customer insights from our delivery app data?
And they have different tiers depending on your spending budget.
Right, exactly. So Instacart actually only gives you access to that data based on how much you invest in their ad platform. Right. So they sort of close the loop on that feedback loop. We've also seen a few of these platforms realize that they actually have an audience asset in their first-party data. So DoorDash announced a partnership not that long ago with Trade Desk to use DoorDash audiences within Trade Desk's DSP.
Okay.
So you can say, hey, I want people who made an impulse purchase on my soda. Now I want to target them or retarget them within the open web rather than just engaging with them in that app environment.
So they bring external traffic and ideally offsite traffic to the domain and the platform.
Right.
With the hopes of targeting new to the brand, new to the category, new to the retailer or platform.
Right.